Shall we start?
Yeah, it's
Almost 11.
Let's wait for one more minute.
yeah.
Lot of curiosity.
Yeah,
First time in
40.
my organizing of the program, 40 people are before 11.
Yes, 46 now.
Yeah.
I guess we are at 11 and
Yeah, we can start.
we
I
should
think so.
start now.
Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to have a program on continuous control monitoring. All of us know. Today's program anchor is Sivaram Subramoniam, who is heading IA in Titan Company. And we have with us today Shalini, who is heading IA in Crompton Graves. Manoj Chigal, who is heading IA in Diageo. We have with us another Manoj Agarwal, who is from Metro. We have with us Rajesh Bhatia ji, who is close friend of mine and is heading IA in Sun Pharma. Jitendra Khatri, who is heading IA in Valvoline, he is also with us. And myself. Anyhow, I am not an expert, so I will hand over the program to Shivaramji. Two of our guests are not in a position to join today, Surath Mukherjee and Devendra Bagree, due to their own compulsions. So over to you, sir. Shivaramji.
Thank you, Narinder. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. सभी देवियों और सज्जनों को मेरा नमस्कार. सारी खवातीनों और हजरात को मेरा आदाब. This is Sivaram Subramoniam, your dost, host, and a ghost for the day. Why I am saying host? Because you heard so many luminaries name. They are the ones who are going to speak. I'm only going to be flitting in and out in between like a ghost who just pops up here and there. Before we start our session today, I am hijacking the agenda unknown to the overall conference producer and going to digress and take a 1 minute extra, only to say that, it's been close to 28 years of my professional life in internal audit. And when I look back and maybe look at early 2000s rather, that's when this profession was really growing. Everything was working in silos. We didn't have, if you were to say who's an expert, there'll be probably 2-3 big names in Big Four as a partner or whatever, who would probably be poaching a lot of people, and not just Big Four or whatever, poaching a lot of people. They were supposed to be the big shot guys or industry experts or domain experts. But when I look at it today, I am so happy, so enthralled with the kind of level of knowledge sharing which this internal audit fraternity is saying, be through any modes. And let's take this very forum. CAE Centre is just a voluntary group of few CAEs. There is no commercial interest of this group in any manner, and the only interest is sharing knowledge across the fraternity. And that's why some very big people here have voluntarily happily agreed to come and speak on topics which is bothering, or rather is a very keen to know subject. Having said all this, I'm just trying to say there is this gentleman, Mr. Narinder Jit Singh, who has been working on this so much in the back end that he just doesn't understand his or appreciate his own role in this. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Sir, please.
I suggest a one quick 5 seconds of an applause for Narinder Singh.
Sir.
He deserves all this. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Narinder, for all your help into this. And now I'm going to start my presentation as an introduction. So let me just share my screen. Just a second. I need to just give me a second. Sorry. Okay. Just let me know if my screen is visible now. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so before I talk about continuous control monitoring and hand it over to my esteemed guests today, I'm actually going to again digress. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm being a complete hijacker today, a pirate today. So I'm going to digress this session again. 1 second. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So when we talk about continuous control monitoring, and as I said, I'm digressing from thing. When you hear the word BO, unfortunately, my screen is all popping up with a lot of things on the Zoom, so I'm not able to figure out where exactly my slide is at. So when you think about the word BO, and ladies and gentlemen, all of you can close your eyes, and obviously the first one has come out. This is one thing that we think when we think about BO, this comes in. I want you to expand your imagination a little bit more, and just figure out, some of you could have thought about a ship's bow, okay? And some of you could have gone ahead with the gesture bow. Some of you could have gone with the bow tie. And for maybe some of the reasonably old but young at heart, naughty gentlemen could have also thought about this lovely lady Bo Derek. Okay, so one word bow, so many aspects coming in. Grammatically, these are all called homophones, and I'm going to stop here and move to a completely different topic altogether. Most of my presentations have always been said very much into Bollywood, very much into mythology, and I've been so typecasted that everyone says, "Aapke presentation mein kuch to mythology ke bare mein hona chahiye, kuch to Bollywood ke bare mein hona chahiye." And I was saying, I'm only giving an introduction. What do I do? And not to waste time, I said this is about Bollywood and mythology, and this was this movie which came in 1985, Ram Tere Kitne Naam. Sanjeev Kumar in the first half of the movie was called Petu Ram, and in the second half of the movie became a very sophisticated, suave guy who was called Ram Kumar or something. Again, I am going to digress further, and I'm going to talk about this particular photograph. This is Temple of Artemis in Greece. If you were, and one of my bucket lists is that I should visit all the 7 wonders of the world. And I've been lucky enough to visit this place. And if you look at any travel brochure, you see this Artemis of Temple of Artemis, and and when you actually go there, this is what you see. Okay, all the travel brochures will put that. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I mean, that is how it used to look. There are enough evidences to reconstruct that is how it used to look. But unfortunately, because of times and the devastation which time had, this is how it looks. Again, I'm going to digress further, and just bear with me for a few more seconds. I'm sure all of us have used this Google Map, and I'm sure most of us would have also heard this very, very strange instruction to turn right, keep left. Okay, as especially happens when you have to go beneath a flyover and take a right. So he has to take a right, but he says you keep left and then take right. Okay, so I'm sure most of you guys are figuring out what the heck this guy is speaking. He's talking about homophones, he's talking about Bollywood, talking about wonders of the world, he's talking about sarcasm on Google Map. You're either bored or you're intrigued. What the hell has this got to do with CCM? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me now come to the point, CCM. And what was the first thing we talked about? That one name, one word sounds so many different things. So does CCM also means flagging exceptions as they happen, identifying exceptions in more frequent manner? Is it a flow or a stock of transaction? What is continuous control environment monitoring? Does it have to be automated? Is it automated? So one name, so many thoughts which comes when you say CCM. Or the other way around, the same thing is called as data analytics. Ram tere kitne naam, CCM tere kitne naam. Is continuous control monitoring called as data analytics or continuous auditing or continuous control monitoring? And what is CCM and what is it? Where are we? How is it perceived? Do we perceive it as a temple of Artemis on the travel brochure? And is it unfortunately at a stage in our organization that it is where it is today? Or what exactly it is? Whole of these questions, whole of these challenges, and why I'm saying it, I'm so sorry. Why am I saying it? I need to link it back to the Google also, is the fact that I think 5-6 weeks back, I had actually put a message in the CAE Centre WhatsApp group saying, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, anyone who has a implemented CCM, can you connect and, can you give me some insights or stuff like that? And around 10 or 15 messages one-on-one or in the group saying, sure, happy to help, XYZ. But trust you me, more than 50 messages one-on-one or in the group, I also want to know, I also want to know. So, a CAE center, which is actually a group of fairly evolved and evolving and veteran chief audit executives. And we are having such a mix of, what is CCM, or we need to understand more. We are at nascent stage, we are at middle stage, we are at evolved stage, or whatever it is. And when I started figuring out what is to be done, it was the same thing. Okay, to achieve at this place, we need to go to that place, or we need to do analytics first, or XYZ first, multiple things coming. So all this kept in mind this is purely, very honestly, my journey in the last 4-5 weeks, when I have spoken to so many of you over WhatsApp chats or otherwise. I am probably, this is my state of mind. Okay. And I'm probably fairly sure that's the kind of state of mind a lot of others would also be having in terms of speaking in bits and pieces across things. So now, ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, the way we are planning to do is we've got some of the people who have implemented CCM in their current or past organizations. They'll come and speak. And we have a set of people who are already on that journey, who would be asking more questions, or rather, probably throwing up some issues around the discussion, so that we can have a holistically next 90 minutes of, constructive discussion, and we come out at least figuring out what is CCM, what is it for me, and how do we go about it. And, looking at some organizations, I mean, maybe I don't need to go about it right now. Maybe I need to wait for a certain amount of maturity or whatever it is. So I'm extremely honored to be now inviting Mr. Manoj Chigal, who's the audit head at Diageo. Manoj has worked across multiple countries, more India, Europe, and North Americas mostly. And he's been in consulting as well as industry. He's got experience of Whirlpool, Diageo, and yeah, if we need some discounts, I guess more than CCM, we go to him for discounts, Manoj. And Manoj, if I have missed any of your aspects from your illustrious career, please forgive me. I'm kind of overawed with the presence of experts here. All over to you, Manoj. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
You actually ended up over positioning my experience and background, Shiva. So thank you so much for that. First of all, let me share my screen here, and then we can go through what I have to share on CCM and otherwise. So just give me a second here.
Yeah, can see the cask and the.
All right. So first of all, let me thank Shiva for setting an amazing context. And I want to start by wishing a very good morning to everybody present here. It's great to see the number of people joining in for this session. Hopefully it will be a very enriching conversation. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I had COVID some time back, so I'm still recovering a little bit. I still have some persistent cough, so bear with me along the presentation. Now, the key areas that I want to touch upon in my session here are basically reflecting on my journey, and I've had the privilege to work on this topic across 2 organizations. I will start by sharing what is my reflection on 4 main foundational pillars of the CCM program. I will try to bring it live by sharing some practical aspects on how we implemented CCM at Whirlpool and how we implemented at Diageo. And between these 2 organizations, there are enough things to sort of compare and contrast, which could be an interesting information for everybody present here. In terms of use cases, everybody want to know how we actually implemented it. So I've not gone down the route to give a laundry list of 50 scripts or areas where we can implement, but I've actually handpicked 4 or 5 cases with which I'll try to bring to life on what we did using the CCM program. And hopefully we'll have a good conversation around that. anything we do in life, they're always learning. So I will close by sharing some of my key learnings on implementing these programs. But before I go to the core of it, let me go back a little bit on what Shiva mentioned. So Shiva talked about multiple names which are used for this CCM or CM program. And in my update here, I'm calling it the conundrum. So let us start with the conundrum. Some of the names, and again, it is not the exhaustive list here of what we refer when we talk about the CM or the CCM program: continuous auditing, data analytics, continuous risk monitoring. Robotic process automation is another slightly different, but another dimension that has started to come in the recent past, and probably many more names that we call here. I remember having this call with Shiva when we were trying to plan the session, and he asked a very fundamental question, like he laid out in his context setting as well. When we were talking about CCM, Shiva asked me, Manoj, what is the real difference between data analytics and CCM? Although very basic, but a very important question. So I thought, when I'm coming and talking with the group here, why don't I start there? So what I've done is to bring in some clarity to that, I've mapped my understanding of all these concepts, and let's go through it, and let's pause on this a little bit and spend a few minutes to generate this sort of foundational understanding. So data analytics is basically a science of analyzing data to make conclusions. Now the way I think about the DA concept overall is that it is the foundational ingredient that we use across all the other programs that we are talking on the right hand side. You can think of it like the dough with which we can use that and make a chapati, or we can make a paratha, or we can make a dosa, or we can make a pizza with the same kind of dough. Sometimes the nature of the dough, also changes based on what we are ultimately trying to make. And that's how I consider the broader concept of data analytics, which is fundamental to all the other programs that we are talking about. Now, talking about continuous auditing and continuous monitoring. So let's talk about both these aspects together. So this is basically a concept of continuously reviewing our business processes to check whether they are adhering to a specific level of performance or efficiency, right? In simple words, this is what we mean by any kind of continuous auditing and monitoring program. And the way we differentiated auditing and monitoring, the first one, continuous auditing, is basically when internal audit remains the primary consumer of what we are creating, and continuous monitoring is when management is the primary consumer of what we are creating, in this model. There's another term, and actually is the name of our session here, continuous control monitoring. And the way that sort of evolves from the continuous monitoring concept is that the emphasis on continuous control monitoring is predominantly on controls and monitoring of controls. And I would, at some level, would say that it is a fairly basic form of any kind of continuous monitoring model that we implement. As we go up the value chain and go towards continuous risk monitoring, the main difference is that our focus shift from looking at an individual control to see how we can generate assurance over an entire risk or a process. So very often we'll see in the risk mapping across our organization that one risk is getting mitigated by 5 controls. So a continuous risk monitoring framework normally goes towards creation of these dashboards, which could be at the risk level or the process level, that encompass all the different controls which form a part of that process or that risk, to bring a more holistic view on how the risk is being managed in that particular area. Think of it like telling a story, right? Continuous control monitoring is a lot more sporadic, whereas continuous risk monitoring try to tell a story in a more cohesive way. So in that sense, it's a more evolved program. Robotic process automation is another. I would say this one is kind of an odd one out in the list that we are seeing here. But basically, it's a concept where we can leverage the software robots that can emulate human action, and not a continuous monitoring model itself, but clearly it's something that can be used to further elevate what we are doing on the CCM program. And then Shiva talked about movies. I'm personally a big movie fan also. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard about a movie called Minority Report. And the concept in the movie is that in the traditional sense, when someone goes on and does a crime, the law enforcement police, go and catch them. But in the movie, the idea is that can you actually catch a criminal before the crime has been done? Can you prevent the crime? And that is the thinking behind the predictive monitoring, concept or aspect of the continuous monitoring program. And in that sense, it's a highly sophisticated and evolved model of the program that we'll see. So this is where I wanted to start. So hopefully, clarify some fairly basic and just to wrap up this slide, the main thing you will see is that the degree of variation across one program to another one is primarily about 10% or 15% degree of variation, with a lot of overlaps across different kind of models that we are talking about. So for the purpose of this conversation, we will largely focus in the middle section, continuous monitoring, control monitoring, a little bit of continuous risk monitoring also. Now, let me move on to what I've been able to synthesize as the main foundational aspects of any CCM program based on my personal experience. And I think this second part is really important. I've not taken this from any Gartner white paper or any other publication. This is purely based on what the pieces I've been able to pick along the journey of trying to implement these kind of programs. The first one, I would say the most important element, and it's actually in the order of importance that I've put here. The most important element of any CCM program, CM program, is the data itself. So both the availability of data, what quality of data is available, what kind of skills exist in our team to be able to extract and manipulate the data. I would, in fact, go to the extent to say probably about half the program or the driver of the success of this program is about 50-60% determined by this first element itself. Now, one example I want to draw on is in Whirlpool, when we implemented this model, we already had a data lake available where our technology team has aggregated data from multiple systems, already made sure that the quality of data is quite good. And as the audit team who was implementing the CCM program, we could tap into that resource pool. And that was a huge driver of how and why we were able to derive value based on the CCM program at Whirlpool. The second big pillar I would talk about is strong risk and control mindset. Now, we are all audit professionals here, and that's our bread and butter. But I cannot overemphasize the importance of this kind of knowledge set as well. So basically what we are doing in the CCM program is that we look at the KPIs, we look at the KRIs, and we basically try to translate those KRIs into an algorithm. I've seen models where that job has been given to technical people. And in my experience, that has been a big red flag and normally leads to a failure. So the knowledge of the audit team complementing the technology folks to be able to translate these KRI KPIs into algorithms that work is a really, really important element. I'm also trying to preserve the job of all the people who are here on the call. Third one I would say is the business sponsorship and involvement. Now, if we are developing these continuous monitoring programs for the purpose of management, their involvement is somewhat organic. But if we are doing it for our purpose, for the internal audit team, very often we don't involve the management. So making sure that the management is rightly involved, we are understanding the business nuances, we are able to cut down the false positives and so on. And from that point of view, this third element of involving management and early enough in the process is again really, really important. And for a reason, I put tools and technology as the fourth element here, because I believe of different ingredients that kind of come together to put the CCM program. This is the least important one. And I think this is where, in my experience, most of the program goes wrong, to put the technology as the first thing and then think about all the other elements more of an afterthought, is probably the biggest takeaway I could share with the group, here in this meeting. So here are the four foundational pillars. Let me try to bring this to light. Bring this to life by sharing some specific example of the kind of models that we worked on in Whirlpool and Diageo, and I've done a side-by-side comparison of that. So I will not brain everything in the slide, but let me hit on some key points here. So in terms of the model type, Whirlpool was a fairly fundamental basic model we operated. We were primarily focused on controls, not the process and risk level monitoring. And then we did it for the purpose of management. So to that extent, although internal audit was a consumer as well, but the primary consumer at Whirlpool was management. Compared to that at Diageo, we actually have a continuous auditing program at the moment where we are not even going to management, but we already have plans to kind of progress the model towards a continuous monitoring, and then also elevate the thinking from a control focus or mindset to a risk focus and mindset, so that we start developing a risk level dashboard or a process level dashboard and so on. Let me come down the list and talk about data lake and aggregation, which from a practical aspect is a really, really important element that we need to think about and leverage. So as I said earlier, Whirlpool already had a data lake aggregation. That was a big help for us to implement this program. So a takeaway for all of you who are trying to implement the model is to really be aware on what your technology teams are doing in terms of aggregation and maintaining quality of data, and see how we can leverage that for our respective programs. Diageo is a little bit behind on that. We already have an aggregation program, but we are probably about 18 months away from implementing that. The other row here is in terms of number of source systems. So we only aggregated data from Concur and SAP in Whirlpool, whereas in Diageo, we are quite aspirational in terms of number of tools or sources where we want to aggregate the data. It's about 10. And my experience is that with each additional integration, the quality of what you can do in terms of analytics and all goes significantly up. So that it will be very interesting when the entire data source come together. Third party, we used KPMG to support us in the Whirlpool program. Diageo, we are doing everything internally at the moment, although we are consulting with some of the third parties. Very often there's a question on the tool, on the tools being used. So the common element across Whirlpool and Diageo is SAP and Alteryx. So in both the organization, we're using these two tools. In Whirlpool, we had a tool called Sophie, which was a KPMG in-house tool developed by KPMG Netherlands. And really good tool, expensive, but really good. Whereas at Diageo, for visualization, we're using Power BI, which again, nothing wrong with it. It's a pretty good tool, if you have the right people working on it. The last thing I would say is the COE model. So Center of Excellence, we had no plan in Whirlpool to put the COE model, but at Diageo, we've already started to put. So we have 2-3 people already in the team in Bangalore who are a part of this model. And as we go along, we will try to evolve it. The reason I made this chart is because as you go on to implement your model, these are all the different elements that you will have to think about. And hopefully this will give you some pieces of how it was done in the other organizations, and will give you a good flavor from that point of view. Then let me take a few examples of some use cases here. And I'm also reflecting on Siva's initial slide. So before I dive into some of the examples of or the use cases here, let me explain the column type and column model. So column type basically has 3 different types of scripts or analytics that we can put in place. The first one is statistical. So that basically means that we are just aggregating the information and presenting that in the form of a digestible dashboard. We are not really talking about exception or highlighting exceptions. The second one is red flag. And the idea here is that we've been able to identify some things that do not look or smell right, but someone after the identification of red flag will have to do a follow-up to really understand whether the risk really exists or is it a false positive. And the third one is actual exception. And quite often when the audit teams think about putting the scripts or CCM program in place, we all of a sudden jump to exception. Are we able to directly report the exceptions or not? And that again is a watch out. And that's the reason I wanted to highlight these three different kind of outputs that come from the CCM program. You can also say that the exception category that we talked about is actually nothing else but a further evolution of red flag, right? When you keep revising your scripts and so on from the red flag level, you can eventually reach that level where all the false positives, etc., have been taken care of, and you reach that level where you are reporting the exception. The other thing that Siva also talked about is whether we are doing the CCM model on the real-time transactions or on stock of data. So you'll also see in this chart that I categorize that which script worked on stock of data, which script worked on real time. The only call out I'll give here is limit the real time scripting only for the highest level risk areas, because real time basically means that the script that you're putting in place that checks each and every transaction that is being passed, and the amount of pressure that it puts on your technology infrastructure is incredible. So just that call out I wanted to make, which is very important to be kept in mind. Let me run through 3 or 4 examples here. So the first one is American company that I worked for. From an anti-bribery and corruption point of view, we put a script that worked on the Concur, the T&E system, to identify potential spend on the government officials, and also identified any donations paid on the credit card. So we had a separate process of paying donations through the compliance process, but in many cases, particularly senior leaders went ahead and gave donation on their corporate credit card. So quite a risky area from the point of view of lobbying and all the other reporting, etc. you need to do. So we put a script which was a red flag based script, but generated quite very, very impactful results. And we were able to identify a lot of instances where the risk could have been quite serious for the organization, particularly in markets like China. The second one that I want to talk about, which is something it's quite interesting, for me, the way it panned out, is the insider trading one. So we were getting ready to publish, one of our quarterly earnings in the company, and probably about 3-4 days before that, the head of investor relations called the audit team and said that one of the analysts has given a report on the expected numbers, and the numbers are exactly same as what we are about to publish after 4 days, right? So that raised a flag in the mind that how can it be exactly same? So with the approval of the HR and compliance team and so on, we did the email search using certain tools and technology, and identified that a part of our sales organization, some people were sharing information with analysts that they should not have shared. So there was a one-time investigation we did and found few things and corrected. But then there was an ask to implement that as a part of the regular monitoring, which we did. And again, very, very high risk area. We were able to deliver results and flags, which really protected the company from materialization of certain very important risks. So that's another good example. And hopefully, I think this also sort of triggers a thought in your mind that they are unconventional areas where we can leverage CCM rather than a very sort of basic area that we normally think about when we think about the CCM program. Another couple I'll just highlight. One is the manual JV is a pain point for most of us here. I imagine we created a dashboard on this, which was statistical but still very impactful. So I'm not able to remember all the elements we had, but 3-4 elements we had in that dashboard is simple number of manual JVs by quarter, by country, by region. We also had a top side adjustment. So if the regions missed booking some important entries, then the corporate would book entries on behalf of the region. So those are topside adjustments, which in itself is an indicator that something did not go right in the process. So that topside adjustment, was very important. Fourth one, which is number of manual JVs after 8 p.m. local time. So this generated a lot of interesting debate in our organization at a very senior level on the work-life balance, particularly for the accounting closing team at the time of month quarter closure. So a lot of insights, a lot of interesting conversations and decisions and actions followed. The last one is split purchase order. So quite a normal thing that we look at in audit. Probably I would say is one of the most complex script that we ended up generating with a very high level of precision. So I just wanted to mention this also as an example. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of perspective on the kind of areas where we applied it. One more example that I do want to share. So I don't know if you know, but Diageo is also the owner of the RCB franchisee. And I was talking with the head of RCB, in fact, just 3-4 days back. And he told me that we use a data firm called CricViz, who specializes in collecting all the data of all the cricket games which are happening across the globe and at any given time. And we all know that the data analytics is really being used in the sports also, but the extent of it really surprised me in terms of the level of data that's available, not only for the IPL and the international game, but even local games, and the way it is being used to drive decision on players or improve their performance and all. That was quite fascinating for me to understand. So I'll bring it home. Just the last slide for me. A little bit of reflection on some things I learned along the way. Some of them I already talked in the previous slide, but let me reinforce a couple of points. I heard this term probably about 15 years back in my career. A fool with a tool is a fool, which I think is a term that really resonates in terms of the CCM program. And I can't emphasize it more that as you think about implementing, think about the tool, but let it be one of the item lower in your list rather than the first item that you really want to talk about. The second point is somewhere linked to the first point. So let's say if you are faced with a situation in your organization that there's already a tool available, analytics tool, which is being used by another function in your company, and you feel that the tool is somewhere reasonable or good enough, but there's another tool for which you did the demo, and you feel that that second tool is phenomenal. My request to all of you is that go with the first one, because the level of integration and knowledge and aggregation data, everything that would be already available in the first tool will more than offset some loss of functionalities that you are thinking in the second tool. And this point is really important because whenever we are building this program, we want to go with the best, right? And then when the consultant come and give us demo and all, they show us these amazing things, they look really, really jazzy. But from a practical point of view, this is something I learned the hard way. Obviously I went for the best one and then learn it the hard way with my experience. Third one is very often when you take your results to your business partners or management, I've heard this comment multiple times that, but this report is already available in SAP, right? And it's a very hurtful comment. It basically means that we did not know all that was available in the system already. And this links back to the comment that I earlier made about not involving management early enough. So that's again a point that I want to reinforce. But a technical point here in terms of license versus subscription, I always prefer subscription-based model, which basically means that you pay lump sum you pay $100,000 for 1 year, and then there's no limit on the number of people that can use the tool rather than licensing, which is also a nightmare in terms of managing the licenses, people leaving, joining, and so on. It's a big nightmare to sort of manage that. Second to last point, super critical point, and we were on the verge of rolling out the new program at Whirlpool, and we got a call from our global CFO asking that, hey, you're giving access to a wider organization with the scripts and tools that you're putting in place. Can they make up a P&L on the 25th of the month before the quarter close, looking at the leveraging the script that you have, right? Huge question. And I'll be very honest that we never thought about this. We thought about all the things, but we never thought about this question. And there was this big scramble towards the end that how do we manage it? And ultimately what we ended up doing was to limit access to some scripts and so on to very limited number of people and so on. But important point, put it in your overall consideration. One more thing is if you work for a company where GDPR is applicable, always ask the question on where the data is getting stored. We also had this example where KPMG wanted to put the server in US that could also store the data from the European entity. Again, a huge problem flagged from FCP from GDPR point of view. So again, important point to keep in mind. The last thing I would say is make sure you're doing it for the right reason, right? It's always flashy for the audit committees to say that we are implementing this program. It's always good to put these numbers that we want to implement 50 scripts or 70 scripts by the end of the year. For me, my learning is that is absolutely the wrong way to go. Don't chase numbers and make sure that you do, even if you develop 5 scripts, 10 scripts, make sure that they address the kind of risks which is worth addressing. So really, really important point. And on a lighter note, I will close by saying that do not, I beg you, do not start with a script on T&E. It's a very low-hanging fruit, almost sounds sad, if you start with that. So my point is keep your purpose, higher. Don't go for the number of scripts, and hopefully, you'll fall in the right place and deliver a lot of value for the organization. So that's really what I had. Let me stop sharing my screen here and also put it back to Siva.
Hey, thanks, Manoj. Thanks a ton. I'm sure every one of us, I for sure have gleaned a lot from here. Before we move to our next speaker, let me just play the role what I assigned myself of being the ghost. So let me act like a Vetal and ask a question to this Vikramaditya here. Couple of questions actually. One is, we talked about your stage 1 of data availability and stage 2 of mindset. I mean, the two pillars or whatever it is. And somewhere you also talked about the analytics library being internally created in the second part of the slide. So, and I presume that the having the strong control mindset is also extremely important to develop the right set of libraries so that you can do the right set of insight generation or whatever it is. So a combination of question, when you said you internally created the control library, what were the 3-4 steps that you kind of took to generate that? Because it is an in-house done. The earlier when your co-source partner or your vendor partner came with a set of things. That's one. The second thing being between the data availability and the risk mindset, or I would say the control library. And I'm correlating the control library with the risk mindset. What would be a priority? I mean, should I still focus first on making sure my control library is there and then look at data availability, or first I look at data availability and then look at my control library? How did we go about making the control library and what takes precedence basically?
Yeah. No, good question, Shiva. Let me answer the second one first. I think it's a simpler answer. I would reinforce my point to say that always look at the data availability, quality, and ability to extract first, because many a times we can think about all the wonderful things that we can do, but my experience is that very often the biggest limiting factor end up becoming whether we even have access to that data, and that quality of the data or the quality of metadata is good enough for us to generate the kind of value or insights that we are trying to generate. So I would say that always look at the data first, and based on that, work on creating the library. The other point that you mentioned is a really good one. My overall feeling, because the model at Diageo and Whirlpool were quite different. When you build your library internally, it takes a lot more time, but the quality of the library and the quality of things that you end up looking at is a lot more relevant and fit for purpose for what really you're trying to achieve. Whereas when you leverage things outside, it's faster, but the quality of output and the false positives, etc., that comes in are relatively much higher. And when I talk about Diageo, when I came in the role about a year back, a good version of the library was already existing. So I can't take the credit for all the good work that was done, but it is given to me that I think it took about 2.5 years prior to me coming to be able to develop. And I don't know if Rajiv is there on the call here with us, but probably, he was a good element who ended up working on creation of that library. So it's a slow process when you do it internally, but I feel that the quality of results it generates is generally a lot better.
Thanks, Manoj. Pretty insightful. And ladies and gentlemen, now let's just go to the logical extension of this. And
Shiva, if you don't mind, Shalini here.
yes, Shalini.
I just had one quick question to
Sure.
Manoj. So, Manoj, the way you explained it was totally helpful. And at least personally, it gives me an assurance that I'm heading in the right direction in my organization. I just wanted to quickly know as to why you would say that even though T&E is a low-hanging aspect, why do you want us not to go into it first? That is one. And number two, regarding data theft and insider trading, the use cases that you had mentioned, was it in line, was it through IT policies or IT related checks that you had inbuilt in your systems? How did it work out practically? Yeah. Because nowadays people use phones as well for transfer of information.
Yeah. No, good questions, Shalini. So first one, T&E. I think that's, I'm almost glad that you asked that question to me, because I'm being provocative, on this. What I'm basically trying to say is that put your objectives at a high level. Even if we go 12 years back, when this entire data analytics concept was very, very nascent or very early stage, we used to talk about T&E. I mean, that was the number one thing where we wanted to go and where we wanted to identify or put this CCM program. When I was leaving my Whirlpool role back in 2020, I was clearing up my desk, and I came across this 3-year roadmap on data analytics program, which was made in 2011. And not to my surprise, it had all the elements that we were still looking to implement, in 2019. And so my provocation, my provocation is that make sure that you put your objective at a much higher level, at a much aspirational level, rather than just thinking of data of T&E. And the other thing I would say is normally T&E is a relatively low risk area, unless we talk about risk of anti-bribery and corruption, etc., that I talked about in one of my example as well. So take my comment as a provocative comment to be aspirational in what we are trying to achieve on the CCM program. On the other point you said on the data theft, absolutely. We had to work very closely with the IT team because they have the tools to do the monitoring on when the bulk download of data is taking place, for example. So we didn't have to put an additional tool to do that monitoring because IT was somewhere doing it. What we had to do was we had to plug in our system to theirs to make sure that those triggers are flowing in as a part of the dashboard that we are creating. So that's how this data theft aspect works.
Sure. Thanks, Manoj.
Thank you.
You are on mute, sir. You are on mute.
Thanks,
Hello.
thanks, Manoj. Thanks, Manoj. I see one more gentleman raising their
Yes,
hand.
hi, I'm Satish here from Thermax, Pune. I have a question for Manoj. Can I ask it right now?
Satish, we're just running a bit late. Our
Okay.
request is that if you could type the question in the chat box, the next lot of speaker could also have a look at it, or and then we probably have similar questions being addressed together by the panelist, if you don't mind.
Of course, I have no issues. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Satish.
Sure, sure.
So, ladies and gentlemen, now as a logical movement, say laughter is the best medicine, but let's get into a more serious kind of a medicine, and that's the gentleman from Sun Pharma, who can give us the next dose and pill on becoming a super booster for the CCM program. May I invite Mr. Rajesh Bhatia, who's probably been in the Sun Pharma company from the beginning of this millennial, and has also been part of other big organizations in the finance and accounts. He has more than 3 decades of experience. Rajesh ji, over to you fully. Narinder?
Rajesh, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry. So thanks, Shiva, for the introduction. Thanks a lot. And I'll, without further ado, I'll present my slide deck. I would say most of what I was to cover has been covered by Manoj, but still, let me go to the brass tacks also a bit more detail, and I will keep the mind into time into the consideration. So way back in 2006, we started implementing desktop audit in Ranbaxy. Now that same desktop audit nowadays has turned into something called CCM. So basically, it's a new name for something which was being done earlier. However, what has changed during this time, and that is the reason why I say that it is CCM2, meaning we have more computing power with us, and the computing power comes at a lower cost. I mean, the cost has gone down significantly. So I'll be talking about broadly about the CCM, how it is structured, what are the prerequisites for rolling out. Most of it has been covered by Manoj. And what are the key rollout steps? What are the challenges that we faced during our journey? I think there is some background noise coming, right?
Can we request all to be on mute other than speaker, please?
Yeah. So thereafter, I'll come to how the total data wave works, and why I call it data wave is because data today is the most important monetized aspect that is there, and large companies like Google or Amazon or others, they are definitely monetizing their data. So why not monetize our own internal data, use it as much as is possible? There is a lot hiding in the data itself. So let's uncover the value basically. And third is the maturity model. So how do we move from the current state to the next state? Coming on to my next slide, broadly, what I am trying to say here is, first of all, the definition of CCM, I think Manoj had explained it very, very clearly. What I also want to add here is to what Manoj said was what are the benefits? I just want to list down the benefits of implementing CCM, and then I will go to the past approach and the future approach. So the benefits are, number one, you achieve a larger or a greater depth and breadth in terms of your reviews, basically. So larger depth, meaning you already have the exceptions in front of you, audit exceptions in front of you. Now you go into the depth to find the root cause, and you have to keep going into the depth until you find a root cause, which helps you prevent recurrence of the audit exceptions. Second is the breadth and the wider coverage. So when I say breadth, what I'm saying is that, say, for example, we have 46 plants in our organization. Any script that runs or any model that runs, it runs across the plants. So by and large, most of these plants are on similar system or maybe different system, but the control points are more or less the same. So what you see is basically a snapshot in front of you as to which plant is more compliant than the other. It's kind of a scorecard that is visible. And usually, I think most of the people would have sort of experienced this question in the audit committee that, okay, this is the issue in this plant. What about other plants? So there we are ready to sort of respond to the queries of the audit committee also, and also help the management to take or put a solution in place which is addressing the issues at all the plants. Third point is you need to avoid repetitive manual audit procedures. So Manoj talked about RPAs for business transactions usually, and of course they would come into play later in the audits also. But RPAs are implemented where there is a rule-based repetitive transaction. That is where the RPA is implemented. So why do we have to conduct or carry out the same procedures for the same audit, on a repetitive basis? Say, for example, you are covering 2 plants now, 2 plants later, you already have the script, you already have the data, you already have the exceptions, you go with those. So at least you end up saving time, the audit time, and you can focus more on the root causes. One of the most important pieces here is, and the benefit here is, that you are covering the entire population, specifically for all that data that resides in some or the other system. So you are not basically relying on samples, but you cover the entire population. Next issue is that, of course, IFC could be a subset of IA, or IFC and IA could be the same. So what I am saying is that we have been auditing our different business areas, major processes, sub processes over a period of time. So we already have the risk and control matrices with us, and correspondingly we also have IFC. So what we are essentially doing with continuous control monitoring is that wherever there is a commonality, and of course there would be a commonality, to that extent, this framework can be optimally used, and that also prevents, of course, the time you spend on testing. And then, of course, as I said, you go deeper into the issues and you find the correct root cause, which helps you in arriving at a recommendation which is agreed by the process owner, and you can sort of implement that, or the process owners can implement that, so that the issue doesn't recur in any of the locations at all. So here, I think most of all, the process owners or the function heads usually appreciate that this kind of an information or exception or analysis is available to them, so that they can take care of all the areas, rather than being selectively acting. Now, when I say past approach, which was rule-based, to future approach, which is pattern-based, I would say some organizations have not started on the past approach rule-based CCM model. Some organizations are on past approach rule-based models. When I say future approach and pattern-based, there are very few organizations which have gone into using machine learning or, let's say, statistical scripts to sort of predict. But here, once you put the predictive analysis in place, the question comes whether it is the job of the internal auditor to predict what is going to happen, or it is the job of the operational management or the strategy team which is sitting in the organization to actually predict what is going to happen. And I will come to that question later. Coming on to the next slide. So as I said, the library or the control library, you can use the risk and control matrices that you have in your organization for different audit areas. You can also utilize the IFC RACMs. There could be certain areas in your ERM which are auditable, which are transaction based. Say an area like cybersecurity, that can be included in your control library. And usually when we get a whistleblower complaint or a management complaint, and you investigate, you find what had gone wrong, and then you go back to your risk library or the control library and cross check whether that area was covered in the RACM or not. Now, if that area was not covered in the controls library, you need to put in that control so that such frauds or malafide transactions do not happen going forward. So there would be a unified compliance. I talked about that. And other aspects, like say, for example, the most important aspect here is prioritizing the controls from risk perspective. So Manoj rightly pointed out. So say, for example, T&E expenses, maybe a low hanging fruit. So what you need to do is, when you are going through your control library, assess each of the controls and what has been the possible impact in the past, and where are you rating that control, whether it is high, medium or low. So accordingly, high also, under the high, you have to also, you may categorize critical and high. So whichever are critical, you go for those first and then keep cascading down to other controls. And you may say, okay, this control is a low control, and I may not want to even cover in the CCM framework. So I think prioritizing is very, very important. I have given few examples like fraud, compliance related controls, or let's say we have a large business in US. So there is a concept called gross to net, chargebacks, rebates. They almost form 70% of the gross sale. So what we get is a net of that 70%, which is 30%. So in our organization, what we did was we prioritized those controls first. And over a period of time, we have seen a good amount of traction there, and the leakages have reduced significantly. Coming to the next slide, and I think again Manoj talked about it. What are the prerequisites for rolling out CCM? How do we go about it? So first of all, one has to sell the concepts to the CXOs. And of course, you have to also take into confidence the audit committee chairman or the audit committee per se, because usually the audit committee would question as to how often and how frequently you are testing the area. Say, for example, a typical area like scrap sales, manifested with frauds, in various organizations. So they would say, how frequently are you testing it? because there is a hell lot of leakage happening in this area. So you have to first of all sell this concept. And this is what I did. And this is my practical experience, which I am talking about. Secondly, once you have got a buy-in from these CXOs, there has to be a communication which has to go from the CEO office. Because remember, in our organization, which is a $5 billion company, which may be less or more, but it's a global organization, and this framework was rolled out for the entire globe. So there has to be a tone at the top, which should be communicated clearly to all the function heads and their teams down below, that you would be getting the exceptions and you need to respond on time. And these exceptions could come to you at certain frequency decided by either IA or mutually by IA and also the process owners. As I said, prioritizing the controls from risk perspective will come later, but first of all, you have to discuss about where the data is lying. What is the automation technology that will be used? That is very, very important. I'll come to that slide later. So, and what would be the infrastructure? Is there an infrastructure which is already available, or you need to put an infrastructure in place to leverage the data asset? So that is also very, very important. So looping in IT, you may not involve IT, you may or may not involve IT while you are developing the programs that need to run. But so far as the IT infrastructure is concerned, the sources of data is concerned, you will have to work with the IT team also. Now coming to the next slide, as I said, I am just elaborating on what I had mentioned earlier. Once you have brought the data assets together, and as Manoj said, we need to first of all understand whether that data is in place or not. So we bring the data assets together, then we start working on the control library, specifically those controls. Let's say phase 1 would cover those controls where there is a high risk of leakage, fraud, or there could be heavy penalties due to non-compliance. We start working on that, and believe me, IA is the best positioned to put a blueprint in place. So at least the blueprint has to be put in place by the IA. External people will come and they will give you they will discuss with you, they will give you blueprints, you will have to validate the blueprints. So what my point is that instead of some external people coming in, and if you have the adequate manpower, you need to develop a blueprint, and basis that you may go in for, let's say, following methods or following technologies to build your CCM framework. One is and these are not mutually exclusive. They are all inclusive in their own right. So one is the rule-based script. So there are specific rules that you build in, and the script or the program runs based on that rule or rules. Second is the process mining model. Very, very important from the internal audit perspective. You get to know us from a snapshot as to how the process is moving, what are the deviations, and then perhaps you can focus on looking at the deviations rather than the happy path or the normal process flow that has happened. In addition to that, you can also see how much time that process is taking to complete and where are the delays. So there you can give an added recommendation to the management that probably you can make this process more efficient. Next is reading unstructured data. So you may have different types of data, say for example, remittances that you have made. There is a specific report which comes from the bank. It may not be in a structured format. So you should be able to read, or the tool should be able to read, or the script should be able to read that unstructured data. Nowadays, there is a concept called intelligent character recognition. So we have moved from optical character recognition to intelligent character recognition. This is a very important aspect and can be used to the benefit of for the benefit of the organization, because wherever the data is, let's say, manually maintained in the form of challans, in the form of work orders or whatever, the system can read and populate the data lake. And of course, then there are dashboards with drill downs. So you can drill down to the nth level to see where these exceptions are happening. Next issue is on the frequency. I think as Manoj rightly said, real-time immediate reporting is to be kept minimum. So usually what would happen is that you go for certain, let's say 8 or 10 scripts which are more fraud prone, or where there are compliances involved, and so on and so forth, or leakages involved. There probably you can go for an immediate real-time reporting, but then you can decide on the basis of the risk involved whether the reporting frequency should be fortnightly, monthly, or quarterly. And then there is a structure that needs to be formed. Say, for example, I am talking about a global organization. So say you have, so the reporting structure could be at, let's say, 3 levels. One is the local level, which means that, okay, this happened at these 4 plants. Then you go at a regional level. Let's say, okay, you found these control lapses at the regional level, let's say Europe or EU. It could be Western EU, Eastern EU, or together. And then there has to be a reporting to the corporate also, because what you are doing is adding value to the organization. And in certain cases, the corporate, whether it is the CXOs or specifically the CFO or other function heads, may want to question their leadership teams as to why these exceptions are occurring, whether the trend is showing a reduction or whether the trend is showing an increase, and why the action has not been taken. One of the most important thing is that as Manoj said, there could be false positives, but apart from false positives, you need to validate the exceptions before you rule out or roll out the CCM framework in your organization, and work with the process owners and take their sign off also. So it's important that they sign off and they say, okay, the rule is this, these are the various data points, and the report that is coming out is correct. So initial sign off is important from the process owners and from IA also. Now, what were the challenges that we faced during implementation? In 2006, we went for a big bang approach. We failed miserably. And then we started taking baby steps. So this time when we implemented this framework in Sun Pharma, we took baby steps. We started with 10, 15 scripts, and then we built it up. And now we have about 350 scripts working in our organization across different areas and geographies. Second is the stakeholder management and response. So even though there is a tone at the top, it takes some time for the process owners to digest that they are being monitored, and they have to report on a or they have to respond with their comments on a quarterly basis or fortnightly basis, whatever is the frequency of the scripts. This is one thing where it will take time, maybe 6 to 7 months for the people to align, and every organization faces these issues. The third part is the data cleansing. Of course, that is one of the steps, because you are pulling in the data. So you need to see that you are removing the duplicates, you are removing the you are removing unnecessary fields, etc. You need to cleanse the data before you start working on it. So that takes a bit of a time. In various organizations, the data may not be in the form or shape that would help enable automated exception analysis and reporting. Initially, there will be a lot of false positives. It's natural. And over a period of time, these would be calibrated and the scripts would give you the correct results over a period of time. I will not come to the adoption by first and second line of defense, but what is important is the change management. Now, if there is a system change that is happening and your CCM is working in the environment and the system changes or the source system changes, how do you manage the change? How would you come to know that a system is being changed? And what is it that you need to change in the script? So this is a very important aspect. And it is very important that you have a process, documented process, which you sign along with the IT team or the CIO's function and say, okay, these are the processes that we will follow in case there is a change in the system. I will not go, this is a very busy slide. I have already talked about these. So these are some of the tools of the trade. Personally, I feel that I would rather go with open source instead of paying money, because nowadays NIME, Python, these are all open source, and they give a lot of functionality, not only rule based, but they also keep adding new machine learning and statistical models. And of course, you can use HANA BI for data lake and Power BI or Tableau for visualization. Now, it is very important to present the information in a manner where a layman can also understand as to what the exceptions are and how a person can go and drill down deeper into the line item level to the nth level. So visualization is equally important, and the way you are reporting the exceptions, as again, as I say, Manoj rightly said, it should be kind of a story that should come out, right? People should be able to relate, okay, if this happened, then what happened? And then subsequently, what was the impact, and so on and so forth. There are several tools available in the market which are open source. You don't have to pay money for it. This is just an example where, let's say, there is a transaction that happens in SAP. Your script is working in the background, or the program is working in the background, and it immediately throws up an exception that the bank account of a vendor was changed and payment was made and the bank account was reinstated, right? Or you received the invoice from a dormant vendor and the payment was made, or there was an invoice which was received against a PO, let's say, which was 3 years old. I mean to say, these are certain cases which need to be investigated. And so there are two tabs you would see: investigate and assign. So if you want to investigate, it goes to the investigation team, or if you want to assign, you can assign it to the concerned person in the either the AP or the PO or both, or the procurement or both. Coming to the latest technologies, of course, rule-based is the old one. Behavioral analysis I'm not talking of, and I'm talking about all those areas which we have implemented in Sun Pharma. One is the pattern analysis. The system understands the pattern and it gives you the outliers. Similarly, machine learning has given us a lot of benefits in the area of, let's say, the performance of the vendors, and where something is going wrong, the outlier is given to us by the system. ICR we have used, and I'll just quote one example because I know I'm running short of time. Process mining we have implemented for almost all the processes like P2P, O2C, supply chain, etc. And it is, I'm telling you, it is the most, it's quite valuable, and it adds a lot of value to the understanding of the internal auditor as to how the process is moving. Unstructured data, and even we are pulling the data from third-party websites. Like, say, for example, what is the crude price that is running as of now, and how the price of our RMs is moving, which are related to crude. So it gives you a very interesting play field where you can really add an impact to the reporting and add value to the organization. So as Manish rightly said, again, I'm endorsing him. It's not for the purpose of implementing a framework. You have to start adding value to the organization by using this tool. I'll skip this slide, and I'll come to one real time exception, or the real used case, and others I will skip, and then I will finish. So there, if you look at the transportation that happens in the organization and the trucks that move in and out from plants to regional warehouses, and from regional warehouses to CFAs, and from CFAs to let's say different distributors or stockists. Here what we did was we implemented machine learning, we implemented the image recognition software, and we implemented the ICR. So what we got was, in the first, I think 10 days after implementation, we got a list of invoices that were manipulated. Say, for example, while a 20 feet truck was used, the invoice was raised for 40 feet. Secondly, the same vehicle was built by different transporters on different routes on the same day and same time. And of course, it also gave us exceptions on partial truckloads and full truckloads. So I think this was an eye opener, because this is one gray area which every organization faces. And we were in fact developing this script for scrap, but then we extended it to the logistics piece. So, and I would say, okay, in terms of maturity, should we hand over the continuous control monitoring framework to the first and second line of defense? Well, I'll give you a real life example from what I have experienced. In our organization, there was a clear mandate that, the functions report what they have to report. They have their controls in place. There are functional reviews happening. We want an independent department to monitor the continuous control monitoring. So in our organization, it is the IA which continues to handle this continuous control monitoring framework. So over a period of time, as the maturity builds in the organization, we may want to shift this burden from let's say IA to the first and second line of defense. But however, as of now, until the system matures, it is the IA which is going to handle this framework. So that's all from my side, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much. It was much more enlightening, and I could also see a lot of questions being posted by the team, and Manoj till now has been handling it. And now that you would be a bit free, you could also be looking at the further inputs onto the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running slightly short of time, and this is what I propose is that there is a very standard term that I use with my team. Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. So, even if you look at the retail shops and all, you will typically find, there are a lot of things that you pick because you see them. It may not be a shopping cart or whatever it is. So, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. And in the line of CCM, Both Manoj and Rajesh have spoken about the importance of dashboarding and the way it looks, how it can be made visually easy as well as interesting to go through. So I would request, and this is how I'm proposing that I'm really sorry for the rest of the speakers here, maybe quick 10 minutes on a dashboarding, another 5 minutes by Dev, who's from the financial services, where the continuous control monitoring is a completely different ball game altogether, completely different spoken till now. So that's a 10 and a 5 minutes, and that takes it to 12:40, and then we can open for question answers. So while you are pinging in your questions, ladies and gentlemen, we'll try and answer it, but we will have to take it on a priority. Probably we'll use a FIFO basis. But having said that, this is how we are planning. 10 minutes on dashboarding by my very good friend Jitendra from Valvoline. He's again got a tremendous amount of experience in IA. In fact, he's done a lot of sessions on SAP and SAP inbuilt controls to the CA fraternity. Over to you, Jitendra.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, so I don't have any slide to present. I'll just speak through very highly. You know, honestly, I do agree that, you know, whatever points which have been raised by Manoj and Rajesh, both of them are really practical. And I'll just talk through about how those, we implemented that thing in our organization. But before I begin, I would differ with Manoj on one point on the tool is the fool is the tool, whatever that idioms was. But why I'm saying so, because I have seen, and this will be like my I would say third attempt of implementing the continuous control monitoring in any organization, or whether I was a part of the team, or you know I tried to do it myself in any of the organizations, and wherein the breakdown was the tool. So that's why, and why I'm saying so, because when we started with a not, it may be considered as a not a thorough testing of the tool or the user friendliness of the tool or the integration with the system. If you go with that kind of tool, certainly you will not be able to go far. And that's why I would say tool is equally important. And in if I were to rearrange, my point of view, I would put, the fourth aspect, which is very important from the technology point of view. One is passion, intent, passion, skill, and time. So time can be bought, skill can be bought, the passion and intent has to be there. That's what the very key is. But from the tools perspective, tool is equally important. And why I am saying so, because in one of the organizations, we had bought one tool that was not user friendly, and then ultimately we had to scrap that. In another organization, we took another tool, and again it was not very user friendly, and we had to scrap. But now what, as Manoj also mentioned, that you should go with what organization already has, and that's what I will talk about. What are we doing in Valvoline from the continuous control monitoring perspective? So one, we are working with the so there is a one organizational wide tool which we are utilizing is SAP Analytics Cloud, SAC, and that's what we are doing it. And if you look at how this works, and probably this may be a good input for your teams also, that all those queries. So for the first step number one for developing any dashboard in our case is first you create a query in the SAP BIW itself. So SAP Business Information Warehouse, and that's where the step number one, which is there, wherein the data flows from SAP, from other Concur, from other tools. Also, we have got the POS system. All those data are poured into our common pool, which is our SAP BIW. So the step number one is to develop a query from there. That's what we did. There have been already standard queries which are available. What we did was we customized those queries further based on what we needed, again, based on the kind of control library which we had developed. And these were primarily coming from our past audit reports, which we had performed. And we thought that once we had performed that analytics at that point of time, we are sure that those were really thoughtful or fruitful. However, how would we make sure that it is continuously being done or being monitored by the management? And that's why we developed those in the SAP Analytics Cloud. So step number one was developing the query. Second one was the visualization in SAC. And for this purpose, we were highly dependent upon the IT, because this is an organization-wide tool, obviously, because there was a clear mandate from the CFO that internal audit will be leading this effort, and therefore they have to put in adequate manpower. So IT had provided all the support to us. We developed 5 to 6 queries. We have had created those dashboard, and we are in the process of handing you over those dashboards back to the business. Now, as a plan B, what we did was, because we knew that it is the SAP BIW, which is the main source of the information. So we did a similar thing with the Power BI, because our Office 365 already comes up with the Power BI licenses. So what we did was, we developed the dashboard, importing those SAP BW reports into the Power BI, and created those created those dashboard. And the beauty of it is, in SAP BIW, if you would have worked on it, in SAP BIW, you just need to change the parameters. The way Rajesh mentioned, you just change the client code and you will be having the refreshed data. You just change the period and you will have the refresh the data. So that's what we try to do there in the SAP BIW queries. Those source files were imported into the Power BI, and we were able to showcase that to the management. Okay, and we did all the kind of things. We did a lot of analytics on the pricing. We did a lot of analytics on the production data. We did a lot of analytics on the manual JEs, the vendor invoices, all those kind of things. We tried to cover it. And so plan A was SAP Analytics Cloud. Plan B is Power BI. So that's why, if we are not able to get adequate support from IT, because they may not ramp up everything, all the efforts, so in that case we had that plan B, and we were able to achieve a good amount of, obviously, the way Rajesh mentioned the number of 350, certainly we are not there, but what we have is a baby step. We took 5 in the SAC, 5 in the Power BI, so we are having those 10 dashboards, which are still, some of them are still work in progress. So that's where we are into this, but this is certainly a way forward. We'll have to, it won't be easy for anybody, but again, it would be the dependence would be on the organization also, like how organization is ready for investing that effort and money and time into it. So we'll have to convince the management into it. And once we do that, I'm sure we can get good results out of it. So that's it from my side. I'm open for any question if we have. Yeah, over to you, Shiva. Shiva,
Sivaram sir, you are on mute. Sivaram sir, you are on mute. Okay. Let me hand over to Devendra Bagree ji. Devendra Bagree was to give his exposure towards financial sector. He has some continuous control monitoring as far as from banking sector is concerned. He is heading IA for Standard Chartered. He has a lot of experience in as far as continuous control monitoring is concerned for the Standard Chartered Bank. He is heading IA there. Over to you, Devendra Bagree, for your comments. Devendra ji, are you there? I think Devendra ji is also not there.
Okay, so I think we can open for Q&A, and you can either post it in the chat, or people can raise hand and then we can see it. But I think a lot of questions did happen. I just wanted to ask the participants whether the presentations would be shareable, or is it okay or not, so that we can commit accordingly.
Yeah, so I'm okay to share. That's the reason I kept it fairly generic and I could not add that and all, but I'll be happy.
No worries. Rajesh,
I'll share.
Okay. So Narinder, you can once you get it from them, you can post it on whatever forum we have. And
Sure, I'll do that.
okay, so I think we had a very, very enriching session. I am now making a very open statement. I'm going to be a real pest with Rajesh, Manoj, and Jitendra. I'm going to be calling you much, much more often and making trips to your office and bothering you a lot. But having said that, I think thank you all. And ladies and gentlemen, whoever is there, Narinder, is there a way the participant can reach out to us offline through
Definitely.
is there an email ID or something where they can share, or you can put it later? I'm thinking as a going forward, we could ask people to put in their queries, and then we can have these panel of experts that we have to answer it. It's a general knowledge sharing.
Any question you want to specifically ask, you can share with me. I'll share in the group.
Yeah.
Or
So yeah, sure.
My mail also ID is also available. They can ask you also. You can also share with them. Yeah.
Sure. Great. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we call it a day. Thank you so much again, Rajesh, Manoj, Jitendra, Manoj Agarwal. We probably, there's so many other questions were happening that we probably didn't involve him much. Shalini, for your questions, now for your interventions in the chat box. And once again, a very, very, very big thanks to Narinder for always organizing it, always being in the back and doing everything with his, I saw some message in the group saying that whether Russia invades Ukraine or US invades or China invades Taiwan, Narinder's program will happen. Okay, so that's about it. Thank you so much.
I'll say this program doesn't happen because of me. This program happens because of Shiva, because of Manoj, because of Jitendra, because Jitendra also, I was discussing about, Jitendra was saying because past 2 or 3 months I haven't organized any program. So he was the first guy to say me why you are not doing so. So Rajesh Bhatia ji also, it is because of all the people who agree. Manoj Chigal ji agreed instantly the moment I gave you a call, even though I know he's sort of a guy who is reserved in or is in the background till now.
Yeah.
But it's there.
So I have a question.
Which,
sure. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. So good afternoon, Gaurav this side. Gaurav Manchanda. So I had one question that so in my current organization we don't have a CCM or a continuous monitoring kind of thing, but I did it in my previous organization, but that was all manual that we did. We pull out the reports and then we prepared the exceptions on the PPT, and then we monitored it on quarterly basis to check whether the exceptions are reducing or not. So but this session was all about more of system driven thing. So since I don't have exposure to any system in my organization, so is there some are there some classes on YouTube or any tools which are free to download from where I can learn this? So any help on this?
With permission of the others, may I answer it?
Please.
Sure.
So Gaurav, while I'll not say I'm an expert, but we are making few steps in analytics, and I'll be very candid with you. When we are doing analytics, and I'm fairly, with all humility, I'm saying we're doing a fairly high advanced amount of analytics. And while we are using Alteryx as a tool, a large part of our analytics are being able to be done in Excel itself. So Excel is an extremely useful tool. As I understand, since you're doing it manually, I'm today you don't have a humongously huge amount of data. It seems to be something which can be managed. To make it automated, there are several macros, several tools that you can just simply do Udemy or anything of that sort, and you can learn that. It's a 7 to 10 days course. You do that. My own view is that you'll be able to automate a lot of activities in Excel. And as you move forward, your organization sees benefits and it becomes repetitive. The cost of automating that very transaction through a very simplistic bot will be very, very low. So if you would ask me, go to YouTube, learn about Excel macros, think what you want, and then, ask it in Excel, in a YouTube or whatever it is, or even in Excel help. If you try and do that, you will get a lot of help. And that could be a very good starting point.
Okay.
And just to add on, Rajesh, you also mentioned the open source like Python,
right?
All those are also available. You should explore that and you will be able to get good help.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, then this is Sivaram Subramoniam now signing off, and thank you all so much for a wonderful Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon, making it a good case for having a nice Saturday evening also. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Thank you for the great moderation, Shivaram sir.
Yeah, great moderation. Thank you.